Welcome to Beyond Four Walls. I'm David Dworkin, President and CEO of the National Housing Conference, the nation's oldest and broadest housing coalition. I'm joined today by Ralph Perrey, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. Appointed in November 2012, following 9 years of service on THDA's Board of Directors, he's now the longest-serving executive director in the agency's history. His tenure as THDA's executive director has seen the agency revamp its mortgage products and down payment assistance program, establish its own loan servicing division, and base THDA staff regionally to better interact with partners across the state. Perrey serves as chairman of the Board of Directors of the National Council of State Housing Agencies. He also serves on the executive committee of NHC's Board of Governors. Fun fact, 35 years ago, we worked across the hall from each other when I worked for Congressman Rod Chandler and Ralph worked for Congressman Don Sundquist. We were both 12. Ralph went on to work for Governor Sundquist in Tennessee, and we both landed at Fannie Mae. Now we get to work together on important issues of housing affordability, a shared passion. Welcome, Ralph. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave. I've been looking forward to it.
So have I. So one of the things I like to really set the scene with is we want people to get a chance to know you, get a chance to learn a little something about you. So I'm just going to start by saying, tell me the most interesting and important fact about you that people you work with probably don't know.
Well, what I think most of them don't know is that I'm a first-generation American.
Really?
Yeah. My parents left Germany literally a month or two after the Berlin Wall went up and were kind enough to bring me along. I think my dad had second thoughts about that during my teenage years. But, it was important to them to become Americans and to give themselves and their children a better start at life. And, one thing that I keep in mind in the work that I get to do in housing is that, they built a good, solid, middle-of-the-middle-class life for all of us, but they never achieved that American dream of home ownership. In those days, you didn't have housing finance agencies. You didn't have people who could help you with a down payment. You needed a big down payment. So that was always just out of reach. But their children got there.
So you're a first-generation home buyer.
Yes. Well, yes, I guess that's true.
Wow.
That is exactly
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's pretty much your career right now, is helping people become first-generation homeowners.
I hold that thought often. I've been fortunate to spend a little more than half of my working lifetime now involved in and around affordable housing. The mission resonates with me as it does with, I think, most of the people who work with us.
Well, you're like me. It didn't start with housing. You and I both kind of stumbled into Fannie Mae back in the day.
Yeah.
Not hired because of our deep knowledge of housing.
No, it was they were satisfied that I knew there were two G's in the word mortgage.
There you go.
And I went from there.
I told Bob Zellick, who hired me, that the only thing I know about housing is that I just got my first mortgage. And he said, we'll teach you about that. And he did. And I think what people did not appreciate or really expect is that folks like us would fall in love with housing and never leave it. And I think that's really gratifying. It was for me. Tell me a little bit about you. You start organizing political support around housing in Tennessee. And of course, the way we do that is by building value. What was it that basically said, this is not just a stopping point? I really love doing this work.
Well, I think, part of this is what we were doing back in our Fannie Mae days. We were in Tennessee looking for ways to put the company's resources to work behind community organizations, behind housing development that mattered. I met a lot of really neat people, and Governor Sundquist had appointed me to the THDA Board of Directors, Tennessee Housing Board. And when my predecessor decided to move on into the private sector, I thought this would be rewarding work. And it certainly has been. I get the sense when I sit with my senior team around the table that if we do our work right, the things we talk about actually get done. And when we do our work right, somebody in Tennessee is a little better housed each and every day. It's work you can feel real good about.
It really is. And it's so tangible. You stand in front of a house with somebody that they're able to buy because of the work that you've done. or a unit they're able to rent
Yeah.
because of the work that you've done so that it's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so real, and it's such a significant part of their whole life's fabric.
Yeah. Well, it makes all the difference. And a lot of our friends at NHC will tell you that. It's not just that you have the place, but the stability that comes with knowing you have a place to put your head and keep your stuff, that your kids are going to be going to the same school for a period of time, that you're in a healthier, probably safer place. A lot of the good things we want for our families and our communities start with housing stability. And we provide that for a lot of folks who are starting out.
I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand the huge breadth of engagement that a housing finance agency and HFA has in the lives of the people in the state and in the housing ecosystem. Tell me a little bit about the ways that you're able to influence housing policy in Tennessee, and what are the most important objectives for you in the Tennessee economy?
Our founding purpose and our principal line of business is still financing mortgages, largely for that first-time home buyer. We've been doing that for 50 years, and we have over $3 billion worth of those loans on our books. That's impactful. You look at the literally hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans who bought a home with our help over that period of time. But in addition to that, and I view this as a real vote of confidence on the part of successive governors and generals' assemblies, we run 12 federal programs on the state's behalf. I think with maybe one or two exceptions, this is a broader range of program responsibility than any of the nation's HFAs. We're all set up a little bit differently, but in our state, almost every federal program that touches housing, except CDBG, flows through us. It's a big lift for an agency of 300 people. I like to think we punch well above our weight, but it gets us involved with, if we're not doing it, we're working with people who are. And that lets us work with communities, whether they're rural, whether they're Appalachian, whether they're in our inner cities of Memphis, in our booming markets like Nashville, and a lot of places in between.
Tennessee really does have it all going on. You have a lot of different markets and a lot of different housing needs and challenges. We have been together in Memphis. We launched the latest year's priorities for the Black Homeownership Collaborative there, had our annual meeting, and there's some really interesting things that you all are doing in Memphis with the Mortgage Bankers Association and the Convergence Initiative. Yes. Pretty cutting edge stuff. I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about Nashville, a very different set of challenges.
Yeah. Well, Memphis, historic, it is a minority city, and it's more deep South in character than the rest of our state. It has some of the same unfortunate racial history that a lot of those places do. And that continues to influence some of the community tensions that you see there. But we have been, over the years, very supportive of the major redevelopment of the old segregation era public housing. Mm-hmm. Really some impactful stuff, whether it's South City, Legends Park. We've replaced all of them. Basically, the city has replaced all of them with THDA's help. But when my friend Steve O'Connor and the Mortgage Bankers were looking to pilot an approach that they hoped would increase the home ownership rate in the African-American community, they were looking for one place to do it. And I said, Memphis. And here's why. It was an epicenter for dodgy lending, subprime practices, equity stripping, refis. An enormous number of foreclosures and bankruptcies followed. In fact, there was a 3-year period when the number of personal bankruptcies in Memphis exceeded those in the entire state of California. Wow. It's phenomenal. Memphis lost more homeowner households than any city but Philadelphia over that period. So it's a place where if you wanted to move the needle, this is where you would go. You not just making the financing available, but working with the community to do some infill development and really regaining the trust of the community. There are plenty of middle-income African Americans with good credit, cash on hand. They're not buying because they don't trust the system. They saw Uncle John lose his house.
Exactly.
And, rebuilding that, working with partners like NAREP to reintroduce them to the value proposition. This is the way you build long-time wealth for yourself and your family. We're excited about that. Of course, 10 days after we started Convergence Memphis, everything shut down with COVID. So we lost about a year and a half worth of time and effort, but we're getting going again. We've got excellent on-the-ground leadership with our partners at United Housing. We're looking forward to moving the needle in a couple of important ways.
And how do we make that case to the Black millennial first-time home buyer? They've got money in the bank. They're making a good living. They also have a multi-generational family experience with the mortgage industry, the process that is pretty bitter.
Yeah.
And they're making an informed decision to not do this. And yet, it is the most effective way that we build wealth in this country. How do we make that case and that it's different? Because, in fact, it is different. Things have changed a lot.
Well, I think in Memphis, the key that we've had is to try to engage trusted advisors in the community, NAREB, the faith community, where they're hearing from somebody that they know and trust that this isn't like what was going on 20 years ago. These are reputable products offered by reputable lenders. You don't need a perfect credit score. You can get down payment assistance. There's counseling help. And, if you're going through a Tennessee housing loan, we're the servicers. So you get to talk to a live person in Tennessee, not a call center somewhere, if you encounter a little difficulty down the road. All of that taken together, but the important thing is that we have the participation of trusted advisors in the community. And I think that's going to help us. The additional challenge in a place like Memphis is you got to be able to find a house you'd like to buy in a neighborhood where you'd like to live. There are other factors that are going to be beyond our control, but the city is putting some real effort into some of these targeted neighborhoods, improve the streetscapes, the policing, punch up the schools, clean up the parks, make them desirable places to live. And then we're working with our partners to bring some, what we hope will be development resources and incentives to do some infill, do some homeowner repair, tip those transitional neighborhoods in the right direction so that that's a place you'd want to buy a home if you're able.
Well, and this is really where I think housing finance agencies are on the leading edge of work that's being done in affordable housing, is the ability to engage directly with consumers, to create mortgage products, to help close some of these gaps. Yeah. But there are problems on the ground where the numbers just don't add up, and this brings us to the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, where in a city like Memphis, you'll have properties where the appraisal is not going to be as high as the cost of building or rehabbing that house. And so tell me a little bit about, this legislation.
That's Memphis.
Is bipartisan. I mean, really, when you think about the neighborhood homes tax credit, Memphis is really the primary target, could really make a difference there. You've helped build bipartisan support for that and other pieces of legislation.
Congressman David Kustoff, a Republican on Ways and Means, who represents part of the city and much of West Tennessee. He is already a sponsor of the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. He's been a big champion on the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act as well. But, you get a solid conservative Republican like Dave Kustoff saying this is something we should look at. I'm hopeful that it gets broader consideration next year when we start talking about a lot of those tax things. But what you described is exactly the situation. In a lot of places in Memphis, what it costs you to build an infill home is $50,000 more than it's going to appraise for. We ran a pilot a few years ago and may try to bring it back on limited form. We just did grants. We told a nonprofit, build it, sell it for the appraised value. We'll make you whole for the gap.
Okay.
Neighborhood homes is going to be a little more complicated, and there's a lot more money involved, which is good.
And better leverage.
Yeah. But we probably did 35 homes in Memphis that way. Probably could have done more. We underestimated the gap. But, that's going to be helpful in encouraging infill development in some of the target neighborhoods in which we're working.
Well, and what happens eventually is that the prices rise to the appraised level.
We would hope, yeah.
And you get the balance there, and then now the appraisal pencils out and
Yeah.
you can move on to a different community.
We were hopeful. When COVID hit, it kind of made all that
Yeah.
moot as far as trying to draw conclusions because nobody was doing anything.
Right, that's for sure. So you've got Memphis, now you've got Nashville, and Nashville's very different. We were talking earlier today about how last time I was in Nashville, I was up on a rooftop reception. I turned around, and if you were standing on the face of a clock, at every hour, there was another construction crane.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of jobs coming in there.
Yes.
A lot of people coming in there.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much housing.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Because you want the jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got to build more. The chamber tells me 100 people a day move to the greater Nashville area every day. We're not building 100 units every day. There are a lot of apartments that are going to come online. But if you look, like 90% of them are aimed at the high end. What we need is more that's going to be affordable to regular working people. We've put a substantial amount of multifamily bond authority and housing tax credit investment in Metro Nashville really over the last 5 years. But there's a need to do more of that, and those are finite resources, which is why both the tax bill under consideration and the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act are so important to us. We've just got to have more. The other thing that I try to point out when I go to communities is, we have some resources, but for them to really be effective, you've got to be willing to let us put them to work. What's your zoning look like? What's the regulatory requirements? What's your permitting process? And how long does that take, by the way? What fees are you charging? If it's difficult, time-consuming, and expensive to build, then only expensive things get built. And
simple math.
Yeah, all those great hotels and entertainment venues, if they're relying on people driving in from Springfield and Woodbury, places that are an hour's drive away, well, that causes problems of a different sort. So encouraging communities to be more open to not just affordable multifamily, but that whole range of missing middle housing styles that are going to be more within reach of the first-time buyer.
Well, and this is the whole issue about NIMBYism, not in my backyard. People are saying, well, we need affordable housing. I want to see more affordable housing, but I don't want it on my street. I don't want it in my neighborhood. And, what I often say is that if you don't want affordable housing in your backyard, you're going to end up with homeless people in your front yard.
Yeah.
You don't have to go very far to find out what that looks like.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? How do we make the case that, no, actually, this is in your interest to see affordable housing everywhere?
Part of my stump speech as I go around the state is emphasizing you as community leaders need to help us get the talk right. Because too many people, when they hear affordable housing, they're picturing, the projects or some $50 a month flop house for troublemakers. So, I like to point in each community to places that they drive by every day and I didn't know that was, Nashville has a very cool downtown area called the Gulch. And right in the middle of that is Laurel House. It's a tax credit property. Nobody knows that.
Right.
But a single mom making $42,000 a year can live there for about $900 a month, which is less than half the going rate at everything else in the Gulch. Then I point to the one by the ballpark and a couple of them on the old hospital property on the East Town. Wherever I'm going, I can point to some of those, and folks are surprised and go, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about housing that's within reach of regular working people, the family of four making about $65,000 a year. There are plenty of people like that, and they do work that we need done and really just assures the basic functioning of your community. Average rent, I think the last study I saw, it's probably higher now, but they said to afford the average rent of a two-bedroom apartment in Nashville, you need to be making at least $56,000 a year. This is more than we pay school teachers. It is more than we pay starting police and fire. It is more than we pay child care workers. It's more than we pay a lot of the people who work in our entertainment and hospitality industries. And we need the people who need affordable housing, and we need to provide it. The other thing I hear, because folks will go, well, all these new people, they're coming in from California and Illinois, they're driving up the price. Why do we want to build? You're not building for them. They're coming here with money. This is not a problem for them. We look like a half-price market to them. the people getting priced out are the people who've lived in Davidson County all their lives and their children who would like to come back and live near where they grew up. Those are the folks that we need to build housing that's more affordable and within reach of regular working people.
Well, and some folks would listen and they would say, wait a minute, is this guy actually a conservative? Like, what is this? But, when you and I first got started, there was a guy named Jack Kemp, and he was a conservative New York Republican, ran for president, and he used to call himself a bleeding heart conservative. And I love that because, you can have conservative principles, believe in business, be a registered Republican, and care deeply about affordable housing because it's a market imperative. Yeah. And it's about our communities.
So many other things that conservatives would want for their families and their communities. It starts with the stability that comes through it. Tonight, I know where I'm sleeping. I know where my stuff is. I know that my children are going to be in school, in the same school, for a whole year. The stability that comes with that leads to a lot of other good outcomes that we want. The stability and growth of our communities. We have a very conservative congressional delegation. Yet when I talk about expanding the affordable housing tax credit, Senator Marsha Blackburn is the Republican co-lead.
She sure is.
4 of our House Republicans were original co-sponsors on that bill. And we basically got them all behind it. I'd like to go, because I'm competitive, I'd like to go 9 for 9, getting them all on the bill. We're still working on that. But, we've really talked about, as a conservative, you can feel good about this one. It involves the private sector. It's run at the state level. And that, how we do that, that's going to look different in Tennessee than my friends in Vermont or Washington State. And that's, it's the beauty of the federal system.
It's one of the reasons it works.
It is exactly why it works. And it produces housing that we need. I mean, hundreds of thousands of units over the time. People forget, before the tax credit was created during the Reagan administration, you got affordable housing because the government built it, the government owned it, the government ran it. You go to almost any place that has it, you know exactly where it is. And I suspect people have mixed feelings about it. That is worlds apart from tax credit developments. We work with our developers to have these open houses when we open, and we make sure the mayor is there, and they walk through and they go, man, this is nice. And they say that like they're surprised.
Well, because they are.
They are surprised. It's not what they pictured in their mind's eye about affordable housing. We've got to show what we're building. We've got to explain who we're building it for, how it fits into the neighborhood and the community. That's how you start to knock down some of the NIMBY, the reflexive, oh no. We've got to get the talk right. And that, I think, makes it easier for a community to go, well, maybe we can ease up on some of the zoning rules. Maybe we don't need to do this, that, or the other. So I'm a glass is half full kind of guy. So this is part of my stump speech as I go around Tennessee.
Well, I think it's important to be an optimist, and notwithstanding evidence to the contrary, and because part of our job is to provide a vision for what it looks like when we get this done and when we do it right. We're honoring Senator Blackburn at our annual gala this summer.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. She's been a real leader on affordable housing in this space, a genuine conservative Republican, and that's exactly what we want. We want a bipartisan agreement on moving this forward. I think we have it. We had an overwhelming vote for the tax bill in the House.
Yeah.
We need to move it in the Senate. And, I think that people say, well, Senator Crapo this and Senator Schumer that. And the reality is we need both of them just to move forward, make this happen. We can chalk up a win early in the year. We can make a difference.
Immediately impactful.
It's desperately needed in New York. Desperately needed in Boise, Idaho, and it's definitely needed in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing some hopeful and encouraging things from Senate staff that, there may be a few tweaks, but I think more senators than not would like to see the bill move. So, as I say, I'm an optimist. I was talking with many of the state HFA folks who are in town this week to talk about that and other bills. And I was, it's easy to get discouraged just reading and watching what's going on in Congress. But, what we're doing is laying the groundwork. We may not get everything this time, but sometimes housing, we're the background noise. We're not the issue that someone can tweet about and raise $10 million for their reelect, but it's there, and more people are hearing about it in their districts, which gives us a window of opportunity. They're listening. And if we've done our work over the last few years, consistently talking about measures like the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, well, now they're listening. They're looking for something to do about housing, and it's been easier to get people to sign on to the bill. This is the foundation that we're laying. And if you look at the list of sponsors, it's not just the usual suspects behind affordable housing. It's a lot of people who are newly attuned to us. And that gives us an opportunity not only to pass some of these bills, but to engage them in other things, like maybe neighborhood homes investment next year, or the bond improvement bill, or several others that are going to be kicked around.
Well, and some of this new housing blood in the political world is going to be an investment that pays off. If we get this passed, and when we get this passed, these folks are going to go start to see developments that have been done as a result of their work. They're going to see in person what it really looks like and what the experience is and how it impacts people's lives. And they're going to say, I want to do some more of this. And I think that's part of how we all got hooked in the housing space.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to attract jobs, and Tennessee is, I think, the sixth highest in-migration state, right? People are going to keep coming, and we need places for them to live, or at some point the jobs stop coming. Ford is investing $5 billion in an electric car and truck facility in rural West Tennessee. Every town, this is a part of our state that's been losing population steadily for 30 years. And all of a sudden, a place like Brownsville, Tennessee, thinks they're going to grow from 9,000 to 30,000 over the next 15 years. Where's the housing going to come from? So there's interest in a lot of this stuff, and some of the tools that we can bring. The market rate stuff's always going to take care of itself. Our role is to make sure that some of what gets built is within reach of the first-time home buyer, and that the rents are reasonable for regular working people. Not necessarily the folks who are going to get the high-dollar jobs at the Ford plant, but all the other stuff that's going to grow up around it, where folks are going to want to have a decent place to live that doesn't require an hour's commute.
Well, and a big plant like that employs a lot more people than those who actually work in the plant. You've got all the ancillary businesses that feed into that, and all the small businesses that pop up to actually take care of the lives and interact with the people who work in the plant. So it's a lot.
Yeah, folks are interested in housing, and as I told my colleagues earlier this week, we have a window of opportunity. This right now is an issue that everybody's talking about, and that gives us an opportunity to connect with folks who ordinarily wouldn't be thinking about housing issues, to win their support, to make some gains on legislation a lot of us have been talking about for years, and perhaps then move on to other measures that would be helpful. We have to increase the supply of housing. That's what's driving the prices. It's not, 20 years ago it was dodgy lending, easy money. Now we've gone 15 years not building enough housing anywhere in America.
It's a big deficit. We've got to make it up.
Right. We got to build stuff.
So running the Tennessee Housing Development Authority is your day job.
Yeah.
But you also have another job that takes up a bit of time. You are the current president of the NCSHA, the National Council of State Housing Agencies.
Yes.
And that's a big responsibility. Tell me a little bit about that and how your colleagues around the country are working together to make some of this happen.
What I like about NCSHA, and I'm really honored to have the confidence of my colleagues for these 2 years, it's a very collegial organization. We are as diverse as the states we represent and the governors who appoint us. So we're going to disagree on approaches and things. But, what fits in Massachusetts or Oregon is going to look different from Texas and Tennessee. But we are able to gather and have civil conversations about things that we get behind, which is much the same approach that you've brought to the National Housing Conference. I see a lot of synergy between the two. But, there are things that we can generally agree on. We're not always going to be equally enthusiastic about everything on the sheet, but there aren't deal breakers in there for any of us either. And I think that's what enables us to build the kind of bipartisan support that we've seen for something like the affordable housing credit. I mean, you never see anything with 100 Ds and 100 Rs. That just doesn't happen much right now. So it's been a good forum there. Our states, we don't compete against one another, but we share ideas. And, I borrowed a whole bunch from my good friends in Virginia, for example. And I like to think that a few things we've done in Tennessee have been helpful to colleagues elsewhere, too.
Now, I think that is the case. And I think we agree on a lot more than we often think. Mm-hmm. And one of the beauties of housing and housing policy is that this is a place where we can find out just how purple we all are. Mm-hmm. And probably no better place to see that in action than your boardroom, certainly in mine. And it's one of the things that has served me well, I think, is to try to not think so much about a big tent, which is staked into the ground. It's hard. There's room for everybody, but it doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
And think about a big umbrella. And that's how I think about NCSHA. Everybody doesn't fit under the umbrella at the exact same time, mm-hmm. but it's moving forward. And if this isn't your turn, you're going to get one. And I think incumbent on folks like us is to say, I'm going to make sure everybody's getting a turn under this umbrella and that, we're coloring it within certain lines, but we're moving forward.
Well, and,
it's important.
Stockton Williams and the excellent staff at NCSHA have really done a good job in putting state HFAs back in the conversation with other groups, with NHC, with the administration. And, I think that's critically important and something I try to talk a lot about simply because I've found that even among people who work in housing all the time, they're not real sure what we do. We're these state agencies, and some of us do a lot of things. Some of us are more restricted to 2 or 3 programs. But it's important that they realize that we're really the folks on the ground who implement the policies that are developed by their thought leadership, supported by their funding, sustained by their advocacy. We're the people who do a lot of that work and keep us in the conversation because we can tell you that's great in theory. Here's why that would be complicated to do. And if you gave us a little more flexibility around these things, we could serve more people more quickly, more easily, and get the end result that you really want. And I think NCSHA has done a lot of that, and we've been pleased to be plugged in and participate in NHC, which I've also very much enjoyed.
Well, this has been great. I could talk to you all day. I may still, but we have a limited amount of time. So let me just say thank you. Thank you for this, but mostly thank you for the work you do in Tennessee and the work you do on behalf of housing finance agencies all over the country.
Well, it's my pleasure.
They make a difference.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this edition of Beyond Four Walls. You can visit the National Housing Conference at nhc.org. There you can learn more about affordable housing policies, affordability challenges throughout the nation on our Paycheck to Paycheck database, and explore membership in NHC for you or your organization. We appreciate your interest and look forward to working with you in the future. Until next time, I'm David Dworkin, NHC's President and CEO, wishing you a great day.